I never imagined that the most ordinary conversation could lead to a confession that would keep me awake all night. My heart is still pounding, even now, when I think back to that evening. What Daniel shared with me wasn't dramatic in the way movies portray it, but it was profoundly real. So real that it changed the way I looked at him, at myself, and at what it truly means to be seen. My name is Sarah, and I am 60 years old. I live in a quiet town, the kind of place where neighbors know you by name and wave when they drive by, but where people mostly keep their private lives neatly tucked behind closed doors. A polite distance reigns here. My days are sufficiently full. I tend to my garden, where I grow strong, stubborn roses. I meet with friends now and then, and I volunteer at the library once a week. But there are also long stretches of quiet. The kind of quiet that sometimes feels comforting and sometimes becomes too heavy, almost tangible. In such a silence, old, long-forgotten questions, which you tried desperately to ignore, begin to be heard. Daniel has been a part of my life for years. He's 63, our neighbor who first became a friend, and then a close confidant. He has been a widower for almost 10 years, and his house stands directly across from mine, separated only by an immaculate lawn and a narrow, asphalt driveway, which seems symbolic of our cautious friendship. We have shared cups of coffee at each other's kitchen tables, swapped tools when repairs needed doing. Daniel always has the perfect wrench or screwdriver, and taken the occasional walk around the neighborhood when the weather was kind. There was always something easy and constant about our friendship, like the quiet, reliable flow of a river. No demands, no expectations, no surprises. Just being nearby. Daniel is a practical man, with hands accustomed to labor. He never spoke about feelings, his language is action, fixing a leaky faucet, bringing a box of peaches from his garden, trimming my hedge when I was ill. Our conversations usually revolved around the weather, gas prices, or new books at the library. We had both long survived life's great dramas and, it seemed, valued this calm harbor we had created for ourselves. That evening, I invited him over for dinner. We often did this when neither of us wanted to dine alone. He brought a bottle of red wine, and I made my signature chicken pot pie. It was raining. Not a heavy downpour, but a soft, persistent autumn rain that made the world outside blurred and cozy. We sat at my large wooden table, drank wine, and talked about local politics. Everything was as usual. And then, in a moment of silence, as he set down his cup, something shifted. Daniel usually looks directly at his conversational partner, but his gaze always remains neutral. He looks at you as if looking at facts. But at that moment, his eyes lingered on me. He wasn't just looking at me. He seemed to be looking through me, right into the heart of the silence that lived within. He began to speak, and his voice was low, barely audible, like the rustle of paper. He spoke about how our friendship had become an anchor for him. How, in recent years, when his own life had become empty and predictable, he knew he could come to me and find order and peace there. I expected him to talk about some new plans, perhaps a trip, but he kept talking about feelings. This was so unusual for Daniel. And then he said it. Softly, gazing at the raindrops running down the window, as if he were speaking not to me, but to himself. "Sarah, I have something I want to confess to you. It's not a request, and it's not a demand. And it doesn't have to change anything if you don't want it to. But I'm tired of hiding it. I love you." He didn't say, "I am in love with you," with that romantic, blinding passion that usually precedes drama. He said, "I love you," with the deep, quiet certainty with which he might say, "It will rain tomorrow." It was a statement of fact. A fact that had existed in the shadow of our friendship, perhaps for years. My heart didn't just beat. It fluttered up, like a startled bird that had just discovered the window was open. I couldn't speak. My brain, accustomed to clean lines and controlled emotions, frantically searched for the appropriate reaction. Should I be shocked? Reject him? Change the subject? But I did the one thing I never did. I allowed the silence to stretch. Daniel didn't press. He simply sat there, calmly looking out the window, allowing his confession to occupy all the space between us. He gave me space to absorb it, without demanding an answer. This was the greatest act of respect I had ever received. Finally, he turned to me, and there was a vulnerable strength in his eyes. "There. Now you know. You can forget about it. But you need to know that I see you. Not just a neighbor or a friend. I see you, Sarah, in all your depth. And it moves me." I spent the rest of the evening in a haze. I remember us clearing the dishes, his goodbye at the door, but his words echoed in every room. I saw his hand holding my gardening trowel, his smile when I told a joke at the library. All these years he had been present, and that simple, reliable friendship had been for him only a facade, concealing something much greater. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in the darkness, reviewing the years of our interaction, and for the first time, I looked at those memories through the prism of his feelings. I saw that many of his accidental actions, fixing a broken step on the porch, bringing me a lemon tart on my birthday which I hadn't even mentioned, were not accidental at all. They were his way of speaking when he could not speak with words. I suddenly felt seen, and not just noticed. He saw my silence, my weariness of solitude, my desire for someone to share this heavy yet precious quiet with me. And he was not afraid of it. That night became a kind of trial for me. I knew I had to make a decision. Either I let his confession dissolve into comfortable politeness, or I take a step towards the unknown. In the morning, when the sun broke through the rain, I made my choice. I could not return to the safe former friendship, because now I knew its cost. I put on my favorite blue dress and went out onto the porch. Daniel was watering his lawn. He looked up, and I saw him tense up, waiting for my reaction. I walked up to him. I didn't talk about love or passion. I spoke in the language we both understood, the language of truth and action. "Daniel, I didn't sleep all night. Your words, they opened something in me that I didn't even realize was there. I don't need an answer from you right now. But I don't want you to hide this. I need to hear it." He lowered the hose, and his face looked vulnerable for the first time. "I didn't mean to scare you, Sarah." "You didn't scare me. You awakened me," I replied. "You let me know it was possible. And now I can't ignore it. But we must move slowly. In the same language as before, but with a different intention." From then on, a new rhythm was established between us, much deeper and more cautious. We didn't suddenly become a couple. We became two people who had finally agreed on how to continue building life, together, but under new rules. Our meetings still began with coffee and book discussions. But now a new unspoken tension was layered within them, which I learned to appreciate. It spoke of a deep, tender lake beneath the surface. Our progress was measured not by romantic dates, but by the degree of mutual openness. He began asking me about my fears, and I about his dreams. We talked about what it means to age, and how we want to spend our remaining time. This was the most intimate closeness, psychological, not requiring physical confirmation. We were building a new, shared trust. Our days are filled with the same simplicity as before, but its meaning has deepened. Sometimes we argue about trivial things: which butter is better, salted or unsalted, or the best way to fold kitchen towels. Sometimes he brings the wrong size batteries, and I fix his mistake with a smile because he fixed mine yesterday without making a report. But even the ordinary seems to carry better when we shoulder it together. When I think back to that first confession, its careful courage, its steadiness, my heart still picks up its pace. Not because I'm afraid of what we started, but because I'm grateful that we began it all. His honesty didn't pin me to a wall. It opened a window. It let air in. It asked me with respect and patience if I might like to step through and look around at what's possible. These days, when I set the kettle on for our morning coffee, I watch for him coming up the walk with his clean, familiar stride. I open the door before he knocks because I have learned the shape of our new agreement. Ask gently, answer honestly. Move slowly, build something that can stand in daylight. We sit on my steps with our mugs and talk about nothing and everything. The sun climbs, the neighborhood wakes, and once in a while he reaches across the small space between us and says, "May I?" And I say yes, and we hold hands while the day makes up its mind. That unexpected confession still makes my heart beat faster. Not because it is a surprise anymore, but because it has become a rhythm. Steady, chosen, human, one I am learning to keep time with, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time.